a named tweet, and it's called Questionable Authority. Questionable authority. Institutions are a modern religion. Media groups generate their own axioms for determining the truth. YouTube, for example, we have to ask the question of YouTube, why is this considered an authoritative source when other credible outlets aren't? And then they say, YouTube would respond, because it's the New York Times. The translation being, why did we do this? Why did we deplatform this person and demonetize this person when letting these people over here stay? Because God. They're institutional figures. They have blessings from the popes and prophets of the modern religion of institutions, academia, media, and state. They have the credentials. They have the title of expert, or whatever sophistry you'd like to use to get people, pass them through sophistry school, graduate, and learn how to be an authority for everyone to appeal to. So this tweet here, the way it's worded, it's a very visual tweet, but I'll walk you through it. So if we put too much faith over reason when discussing institutionals, media figures, institutional figures, presidents, governments, senators, congresspeople, just anybody in a state of power that has an institutional force backing them. If we put too much faith in these people and believe everything they say, well, it's the same thing as if we turn to a traditional deity like God. Look up and say, well, I'm doing this because God. I believe that the New York Times is more credible because God. The reality is that a lot of these major institutional media sources have proven themselves over time to have just as many flaws as your average quote-unquote conspiracy theory site. And in fact, I'll go even one step further. I'll talk about how even satire sites are in the crosshairs of these institutions because they're too close to the reality of the fake news. People don't know the difference between fake news from the institutions and fake news from a satire site like The Onion or the Babylon Bee. So they're being attacked for misinformation and disinformation when they're clearly marked satire. If that doesn't give us all an indication of where the state of epistemology is right now in 2020, United States, well, I don't know what does. So media groups generate their own axioms for determining the truth. They say it's an authoritative source. It's a trusted source. And of course, these are all persuasion words. They're all persuasion words. You know, you can trust it. Why can you trust it? Well, it's the New York Times. How long have they been around? Well, 100 years, 200 years. So they're trusted. But the fact is that institutions are people. And as people are irrational, well, we can be corrupted. And we can actually do things that, well, really only pertain to our self-interest in a way that, well, I think we can all relate to. We can all see that sometimes people don't want to say this or they'll say this a certain way. And they'll do it because it helps them. It brings them more success. And the institutions have to keep this narrative going. It's all working. The media macro simulation, as I sometimes call it, is you have to have a set narrative. Otherwise, everyone's contradicting each other. If you watch Saturday Night Live, you'll actually see it happening in real time. The writers have talking points memos, most likely. That's the way it looks, where they all have to make sure they're following the same narrative as it pertains to media figures. For example, if you look at their Democratic debate sketch at the beginning of one of the more recent episodes, and they had all the candidates, Pete Buttigieg, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, Amy Klobuchar, cringe Tom Steyer, no Michael Bloomberg. Actually, no. Fred Armisen played Michael Bloomberg. who is in the next debate, I believe, because the DNC let him in. All you got to do is put up, what, 30, 40, 50 million dollars, and you can be a Democratic candidate. Try it today. Do it like Mike Bloomberg. They had Andrew Yang, but everyone kind of followed it, fell into exactly where they belong in the narrative. And of course, immediately the figures that are less popular with the establishment media, the institutional media, under the modern religion of institutions, people like Bernie Sanders, the first thing they say is, he had a heart attack. Heart attack. There's a heart attack. Then you have Tulsi Gabbard. I voted present for impeachment, which is now, as Scott Adams so aptly put, unpeachment, because the senators voted not to hear any witnesses in the Senate impeachment trial of Orange Man, President Trump. But they'll use those specific associations and callbacks that people recognize. Because if you're following the media macro simulation around these figures, oh, Pete Buttigieg isn't doing so well with African Americans or really black people. You know, they'll say these things. You know, they'll fall into the, like, there's a sort of like established, this is the way things are. This is who that person is. Oh, here's Bernie Sanders, he's a curmudgeonly old man. Here's Tulsi Gabbard, she's cold, and she always says things in the same voice, very coldly and clinically. She'll say, regime change wars and counter-interventionism and our brothers and sisters in arms. And to be fair, there is a bit of satire and humor to be farmed from people like Tulsi Gabbard. But they all follow the same script. From Kimmel to Stephen Colbert. Even Stephen Colbert even uses almost exactly the Donald Trump impression that Alec Baldwin uses on SNL. So there's this sort of continuity between all these different media figures. They're all going by the same general script, because otherwise they'd be contradicting each other, and people can't have that. They need to know exactly what the situation is with their cultural figures, according to their system. So, talking truth, and of course modern religions are a search for order, purpose, universal truth, and moral virtue, among other things. I've talked about this at length, including my brand new video, Modern Religions for Postmodern Prophets. Check that out on BitChute and YouTube. It's very good. It'll talk a little bit about this issue and give you an overview of why I use this postmodern framing called modern religion. It's rather helpful. So YouTube, why is this considered an authoritative source when other credible outlets aren't? Why do you have to bring up a Wikipedia, talking non-credible here, Wikipedia article at the bottom of every video when they're talking about a topic? Like, you have to direct them back to the accepted, established narrative. Otherwise, people will be believing all different stuff. The truth will lie between. There'll be two sides to every equation. And I don't think that really works in the best interests, the self-interest of these institutions that are trying to persuade people and culturally engineer people to where they want them to go. That's why Google itself, we have to ask the question of Google, who owns YouTube, why, when Project Veritas came out and talked about the algorithms that they were manipulating and the systems they were using to direct people around, why are you doing this? What's the goal? And they say, well, we support the Democrats. We support Elizabeth Warren. We don't want there to be wrong think. We want right think only. And that's the narrow little window of acceptable dialogue that we want. And everything outside of that, that's all hate. That's extremism. Got to stick to the script. That's the institutional world when it comes to this stuff. They say it's an authoritative source because it's the New York Times, it's the Washington Post, it's Fox News, it's CNN, it's whatever you want to call it, whatever source you consider to be so big and influential and institutional, that, well, put aside reason, bring in the faith, and just say, it's the Washington Times, I can trust it. It's the New York Post. You know, all the other papers are anti-Trump. This one is the only one that's borderline tabloidy. But hey, you know, it goes with my confirmation bias, and I just stick with it. Got to question everything, folks. Question authority. That's why this tweet is called Questionable Authority. We must always be vigilant on this journey to getting all of the information